Major objectives of planning. Planning for India was an instrument to realize the aspirations and dreams of the future. We know that the foundations of future India were not laid in one day. The cherished dream about future India had evolved through a long-drawn process of the entire period of the freedom struggle. These aspirations and goals got their proper places and due importance in the reports of the National Planning Committee, NPC, in the deliberations of the Constituent Assembly and finally in the Constitution of India. From the margins of the ripening nationalist movement as well as taking clues from the Soviet and the French styles of planning, the NPC articulated the objectives of planning in India. The process of planning in India tried to include all the aspirations of the nationalist movement as well as of the future generations. But this will be a highly general comment upon the objectives of planning in India. We need to delve into the specific and objective goals of planning in India to further our discussions. Some of the historic deliberations regarding planning will serve our purpose. Reviewing the entire situation, in the light of the social philosophy evolved over decades, the Constituent Assembly came to the conclusion that to guide this revolution of rising expectations into constructive channels, India should make determined efforts through carefully planned large-scale social and economic development and the application of modern scientific and technological improvements, to bring about a rapid and appreciable rise in the standard of living of the people, with the maximum measure of social justice attainable. On the whole, it was a call for India becoming a welfare state. 31 This important deliberation does not only call for the necessity of planning for the country but it also outlines the broader objectives of planning. 2. There are three important features included in the constitutional provisions, which pertain to the objectives of planning in the country. 32. Economic and social planning is a concurrent subject. Also, while framing the union, state, and concurrent lists, allocating subjects and other provisions, the Constitution vests power in the Union to ensure coordinated development in essential fields of activity while preserving the initiative and authority of the states in the spheres allotted to them. The Constitution includes provisions for promoting cooperation on a voluntary basis between the Union and the states and among states and groups of states in investigation of matters of common interest, in legislative procedures and in administration, thus avoiding the rigidities inherent in federal constitutions. Articles 249, 252, 257, 258, 258-A and 312. In other words, the objective is cooperative federalism. The Constitution also sets out in broad outline the pattern of the welfare state envisaged and the fundamental principles on which it should rest. These are the major cornerstones of planning and its objectives enshrined in the Constitution that will breed enough Union-state tussle in coming decades and make it compulsive for the government to resort to reforms with a human face, rhetoric. We can see the methodology of planning taking a U-turn in the era of the economic reforms since the early 1990s. 3. The government resolution announcing the setting up of the Planning Commission, March 1950, started with a reference to the constitutional provisions bearing on the socio-economic objectives of the Constitution. The fundamental rights and the directive principles of the Constitution assure every citizen, among other things, adequate means of livelihood, opportunities for employment and a socio-economic order based on justice and equality. Thus, the basic objectives 33 of planning were already given in the provisions of the Constitution of India. These were emphatically stated in the first 5-year plan, 1951-56, itself, in the following words. The urge to economic and social change under present conditions comes from the facts of poverty and of inequalities in income, wealth and opportunity. The elimination of poverty cannot obviously be achieved merely by redistributing existing wealth. Nor can a program aiming only at raising production remove existing inequalities. These two have to be considered together. 4. The above objectives of planning were emphasized in one form or the other in the coming times also. As the second 5-year plan, 1956-61, said, the plan has to carry forward the process initiated in the first plan period. It must provide for a larger increase in production, in investment and in employment. Simultaneously, it must accelerate the institutional changes needed to make the economy more dynamic and more progressive in terms no less of social than of economic ends. The same objectives were repeated by the sixth 5-year plan, 1980-85, in the following words. The basic task of economic planning in India is to bring about a structural transformation of the economy so as to achieve a high and sustained rate of growth, a progressive improvement in the standard of living of the masses leading to eradication of poverty and unemployment and providing a material base for a self-reliant economy. 6. It will be highly needful to inquire about the objectives of planning in the era of the economic reforms initiated in the fiscal 1991-92 as this new economic policy, NEP, made the experts and economists to conclude many questionable things about the objectives of planning in the country. The need to shift dependence from wage to self-employment. B. The state is rolling back and the economy is becoming pro-private and sector-wise the social purpose of the planning will be lacking. C. The objectives of planning nearly outlined hitherto have been blurred. D. The promotion of foreign investment will induce the economy into the perils of neo-imperialism, etc. But all the above given doubts were cleared by the forthcoming plans in straightforward words. We may quote from the following plans. Times, for the future economic development, the economy will be more dependent upon private participation and the nature of planning will become more indicative with the major objectives of planning remaining the same. This was announced by the government while launching the economic reforms, 23 July 1991, and commencing the 8th five-year plan, 1992-97. There was no change in the basic objectives of planning even though there was change in instruments of policy. This was announced by the government while announcing the new economic policy, 1991. While the 9th plan, 1997-2002, was being launched, it was announced, the goals of planning in India, which were set by Panditji, have not changed. The 9th plan does not attempt to reinvent the wheel. At the same time, the goals and targets this plan attempts to achieve are based on the lessons of experience including the 8th plan. They address today's problems and challenges and try to prepare the nation for tomorrow as well. 34. Finally, a broad consensus looks evolving through the process of planning and crystallizing on the 6 major objectives of planning 35 in India, which are as follows. I. Economic growth. Sustained increase in the levels of production in the economy is among the foremost objectives of planning in India, which continues till date and will be so in future, without any iota of doubt in it. 2. Poverty alleviation. Poverty alleviation was the most important issue which polarized the members of the NPC as well as the Constituent Assembly, that a highly emphatic decision in favor of a planned economy evolved even before independence. Several programs have been launched in India directing the cause of poverty alleviation by all the governments till date, and the process continues even today with more seriousness. We see the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program NREGP being launched by the UPA government in 2006 by passing an act in the parliament. The matter has started attracting such high political concern. 3. Employment generation. Providing employment to the poor has been the best tool of economics to alleviate poverty. Thus, this objective of planning in India comes naturally once it commits itself to alleviate poverty. Employment generation in India has been, therefore, part and parcel of the objective of poverty alleviation in India. General programs and schemes have been launched by the governments from time to time in this direction, some based on the wage employments still, others based on self-employment. 4. Controlling economic inequality. There were visible economic inequalities in India at the interpersonal as well as at the intrapersonal levels. Economic planning as a tool of checking all kinds of economic disparities and inequalities was an accepted idea by the time India started planning. 36 To fulfill this objective of planning, the governments have enacted highly innovative economic policies, at times even inviting a tussle with regard to the fundamental rights enshrined in the constitution. Though Indian planning has socio-economic objectives to fulfill, only economic planning was made a part of the planning process, technically speaking, and social planning, better called social engineering, was left to the political process. That is why reservation in government jobs and admissions in premier academic institutions, land reforms, promoting intercaste marriages, etc., do not fall under the purview of the Planning Commission. We, Self-Reliance. During the 1930s and 1940s there was an ardent desire among the nationalists, capitalists and the NPC for making the economy self-reliant in all economic sphere. Self-reliance was defined not as autarky but as an effort to strike against a subordinate position in the world economy. As J. Jawaharlal Nehru asserted, self-reliance does not exclude international trade, which should be encouraged but with a view to avoid economic imperialism. 37. India still strives for self-reliance in every field of the economy as well as serving the realities of higher interdependence in the globalizing world. Post-World Trade Organization, WTO. 6. Modernization. Modernizing the traditional economy was set as a foremost objective of planning. Especially, the agriculture sector of the economy needed an immediate inclusion of modern methods and techniques of farming, dairying, etc. Similarly, in education too, India needs to go for inclusion of modern education system. India did not miss the chance of accepting the importance of modern science and technology. As the economy had selected industry as its prime moving force, PMF, it was essential to adopt the changing dimensions of science and technology. The major objectives of planning in India are not only broad but open-ended. That is why it hardly needs any change and modification in them with the changing times. It means, after the completion of one plan, the objectives for the new plan are automatically set. Coming to the composition of the objectives, we may confidently conclude that all the aspirations of the preamble, 38 the directive principles of the state policy, 39 the fundamental duties and the fundamental rights, have got their due place and weightage. All the aspirations of the nationalists and the freedom fighters look resonating in the very soul of the Indian planning system. The objective of planning in India was so broad a term that gradually it encompassed the entire sphere of administration excluding only defense and foreign affairs. The objectives of planning tremendously evolved and got cemented together once the functions of the Planning Commission were announced by the government in 1950 itself and further expanded in 2002, which we will see in the next subtitle.